If there were a major disaster and there was no medical facilities or physicians available, what would you do if a family member or a neighbor required medical attention for survival? With information readily available on the internet, it's easy to assume you can quickly turn to Google for life-saving information. But if the internet is not available, then what? The scenario I just outlined is not only possible, but a very real and probable scenario depending on the size and the recovery time frame after a disaster. We've become so accustomed to modern conveniences working flawlessly, but as we've all witnessed recently between hospitals being overloaded during a pandemic and the supply chain that continues to falter, many have come to understand that no one is responsible for your own well-being but you. In this video, we're going to take a look at one of the most critical tools a prepper should have in their inventory. I would even argue that this is the first book you would want to buy if you're getting serious about being prepared. And this is called the Survival Medicine Handbook. And it was written by Dr. Joseph and Nurse Amy Alton. And I put together a series of questions I sent to them. And they were kind enough to provide their insight and knowledge, which they'll detail momentarily. In my opinion, and I'm not alone in this view, they are one of the most valuable resources in the prepper community, providing very actionable medical information for when medical help may not be an option. One of my personal biggest fears as a prepper is watching one of my family members die if things get so bad that I couldn't get them help or simply didn't know how to treat their ailment. Armed with this book, I at least have a glimmer of hope that if I'm the only option to help my family or community when there are no medical options, I have this life-saving information available. So with that being said, I've asked them to record video responses that will hopefully answer many of the questions you may be wondering if you're getting serious about medically being prepared. At the end, I'll share some personal information about some of the next steps I'm taking next year to work on developing my own medical skills. So here's the first question. Please tell us about your medical background, licensing, and your relationship with the emergency preparedness prepper community.
Well, Chris, I'm a retired but actively licensed physician in my home state of Florida, a retired fellow of the American College of Surgeons, and life fellow of the American College of OBGYN. I'm also a member of the Wilderness Medical Society and a certified advanced wilderness expedition provider, as well as the co-founder of the award-winning survival website doomandbloom.net, where you'll find over 1,200 articles, podcasts, and videos on medical preparedness. In addition to that, I contribute to magazines in the homesteading survival genre, like American Outdoor Guide, Off-Grid Recoil, Backwoods Home, Survivor's Edge, and others, and am the co-author, along with my wife Amy, an advanced registered nurse practitioner and certified nurse midwife, of books like the Survival Medicine Handbook, now in a greatly expanded new 4th edition, the newly revised Alton's Antibiotics and Infectious Disease, and Alton's Pandemic Preparedness Guide. If you still don't know me, I wrote the first physician article about the use of fish antibiotics in survival scenarios over a decade ago. Oh, if you're wondering about the background, we do live in Florida, but spend part of the year in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, gateway to the beautiful Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That's Mount LeConte over my shoulder.
Question number 2. Why should the typical non-medical person think a book like this could actually help them?
Well, Chris, because learning to become medically prepared just makes common sense. Many situations exist where medical self-reliance would serve a family very, very well. In a true disaster, the ambulance might be heading in the other direction. There might not be rescue helicopters appearing over the horizon. That means that you, the average citizen, could well be the highest medical asset left in times of trouble. There already existed a wealth of information about injuries on wilderness hikes or accidents at home, where stabilization and transport to a hospital was the extent of your responsibility. Few books, however, considered the possibility of settings so remote or scenarios so devastating that no hope of modern medical care existed. None of these first aid books discussed how to deal with a major outbreak of infectious disease, for example, or how to close a wound, or how to care for an open wound, or even a fracture from beginning all the way to full recovery. Even books meant for use in third world environments ended chapters by telling their readers to get to modern medical care as soon as possible. This was excellent advice for modern times, but not very helpful if a disaster or pandemic knocked hospitals out of commission. So we wrote a book in plain English that everyone could understand that assumed help wasn't on the way. What to do, not just for bleeding, but chronic disease, infection, dental issues, and much, much more. A book that would give the family medic the practical knowledge needed to have the best chance of keeping it together, even if everything else fell apart.
Question number 3. What are the most common medical issues people are likely to face after disaster?
Well, Chris, I'll give you a top 10 that a doctor once wrote about who was the sole volunteer medical provider in an isolated third world environment for 15 months over a period of about 3 years. In no particular order, they were musculoskeletal injuries, minor like sprains and strains, and major like fractures, respiratory infections, both upper and lower, minor traumatic wounds, lacerations and the like, minor infections, some of those in those traumatic wounds, diarrheal disease from bad water or poorly prepared food, dehydration, allergic reactions, sometimes severe like anaphylactic shock, dental issues. Bet you're surprised on that. Well, you know what? If a storm takes away power for a week, you probably don't need a dental kit in your supplies. But if a disaster takes you off the grid for 6 months, a year, that stuff becomes very, very important. Heat stroke. He was in a tropical environment, but I'll add hypothermia for cold exposure as something you might expect in other climates. Major trauma like knife and gunshot wounds. This doctor was in an unstable region. Skin rashes and burns. And surprise, again, pregnancy and childbirth, not to mention family planning. We discuss all of these and much, much more in the 4th edition of the Survival Medicine Handbook. Not just what to do in the first hour, but for the entire length of the treatment and recovery process.
Question number 4. Can you give us some examples of utilizing this book after major disaster if there were no medical facilities available to handle some of the issues you may face?
Sure. Let's say that the SARS-CoV-2 virus had a 10%, 15% death rate. In that case, all hospitals would be shut down due to loss of personnel or just plain overcrowding and understaffing. You want to be ready in case someone in your family got sick because you know there won't be much help available elsewhere. The book has sections that take you through how to put together an effective sick room for epidemics, another that discusses nursing care, another that tells you how to deal with specific symptoms. Let's say a member of your group breaks a leg. The book teaches you not only how a broken bone heals, but how to reduce the deformity caused by the fracture, how to place splints and even casts, and how to provide traction, and also how to follow that injury until it's fully recovered. Let's say a member has an open wound. The book takes you through its evaluation, discusses whether or not it should be closed, the different ways to close it, step-by-step instructions, plus it teaches you how to treat it as an open wound until it heals in on its own. Plus the book discusses antibiotics, natural and commercial, that you can obtain without prescription for your supplies to protect against infection. How about somebody coming to you with a dental problem? The book discusses what to do for a cracked tooth, or a tooth that's knocked out, or a decayed tooth that's causing a lot of pain. It even goes into the process of how to extract a tooth, because 90% of dental emergencies can be dealt with by extraction. It's important for me to say that you should read this book before a disaster happens. We tell you the supplies you need to fulfill the duties of medic for all the things I've just described, plus much more.
Question number 5. For someone starting out and getting serious about being medically prepared as a prepper, what advice would you recommend?
Well, Chris, don't ignore online sources of information now. Take advantage of websites with quality medical information. Print out the information you believe will be helpful to your specific situation. Indeed, the first edition of our book was a result of readers who were printing out hundreds of pages of our articles. With your own survival library, you'll be able to accumulate a unique store of knowledge that fits to your particular needs. It should be in physical form because you never know one day the internet might not be as accessible as it is today. Some information is best absorbed visually. Video sites like YouTube and others have thousands of medically oriented films on just about every single topic you can think of. Videos range from suturing wounds to setting a bone fracture to extracting a damaged tooth. You'll have the benefit of seeing things done in real time, which is always better than just reading a description or looking at pictures. With regards to training, there are various avenues. Almost every municipality gives you access to courses that would help you function as an effective healthcare provider. Some are time-intensive and costly, but many are not. You might consider taking a nursing assistant course. I'm sure no one's thought of that one. The duration varies, but I've seen 2-week day courses or even 4-week evening classes offered, which would work out if you still had a job that's full-time. Check out your local programs. You will learn the basics of hands-on nursing care, which may seem boring, but are necessary for out-of-hospital care. Some include how to perform good body mechanics and lifting techniques, learning about sterilizing and disinfecting, hygiene, proper application of bandages, dressings, and of course taking vital signs. There are more intense training programs like a licensed practical nurse, a registered nurse, and even nurse practitioner. Every level provides more in-depth knowledge. There's a free course called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. Most of us won't have the time or resources to commit to an intensive EMT-style training course, but for many, a Red Cross First Responder or CERT course is the ticket. These programs cover a lot of the same subjects, but in much less detail, and would certainly represent a good start on your way to getting trained. The usual course length is about 40 to 80 hours. Besides the Red Cross, many municipalities also offer the course. Other courses meant to teach the control of hemorrhage are also available. We, for example, are certified Stop the Bleed instructors. Take a CPR course. Of course, the American Heart Association and others provide standard CPR courses. Everyone should take these whether or not they will have medical responsibility in times of trouble. The limitation here is that successful resuscitation, say a heart attack, will require a patient transfer to an intensive care unit to significantly increase the chance for full recovery. This won't be possible in survival settings. You might consider an EMT course. This is the standard for providing solid emergency care. The courses are offered by many community colleges. The course length is usually several hundred hours and varies somewhat by state. This represents a significant commitment of time and effort, but it's the complete package short of going to medical or nursing school for years. You'll receive an overview of anatomy and physiology, and how to evaluate sick or injured patients and stabilize them for transfer to the hospital. As medical facilities may not be accessible in the aftermath of a disaster, they may not be perfect for a long-term survival situation. Having said this, you will still learn a lot of useful information, and we highly recommend them. It should be noted that there are different levels of emergency medical technician. EMT Basic is the primary course of study, but you can continue your studies and become a paramedic. Paramedics are taught more advanced procedures such as placing airway, using defibrillators, and inserting intravenous lines. In remote areas, they might even take on the role of physicians and nurses to give injections, place casts, or stitch up wounds. These skills are highly pertinent in the aftermath of a disaster. Consider wilderness or other medical courses. There are a number of specialty courses provided by private enterprises which might be helpful. Wilderness EMT or tactical EMT courses are programs meant to teach medical care in a potentially hostile environment. Priority is given to education on stabilization and transport to higher medical resources. Even so here, adjustments may be made for long-term survival scenarios. There are many wilderness schools out there as well. These will offer some practical training to non-medical professionals. It pays to research the schools that provide this training, as the quality of the learning experience probably varies. Military training, of course, is amazing. Some of the best caregivers in times of trouble will be those who served as a combat medic or corpsman in the armed forces. If you are young and eligible to serve, consider it. It's a big decision, but one that pays dividends down the road. Thank you.
Again, thank you to Dr. Joseph and Nurse Amy Alton for taking the time to answer these questions and provide insights to help you on your medical journey if you want to take on the responsibility of helping your community when the grid may go down. I'll post a link to their YouTube channel, their website, and their book. On a personal note, as Nurse Amy mentioned, I'm giving serious consideration to doing EMT training next year. Now, I realize that training is designed to stabilize someone until you can get them to a hospital, which may not be an option if a true grid down situation were to play out, but I believe it would be a firm foundation nonetheless. I'm a bit nervous to announce this on the channel, as I know you guys will hold me accountable to doing it, but maybe that's why I'm saying it now. I have shared my background in the past. I was a pre-med student. I did the MCAT Medical College Admissions Test. I applied to medical schools, and at the very last second, I decided to not go into medical school. I have no regrets. It was a decision I made at the time in my life that I think was the right decision, but there is, let's just put it this way, there's a desire inside of me still to be medically capable and prepared should a disaster occur. So that's just a personal passion, something that I'm working on, and I'd be curious to hear any of your ideas, your questions, your feedback in the comments section below. What are you working on to get medically prepared? What's your skill level? Are you prepared at all? Is this something that you're working on and you want to continue to further? I'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts in the comment section below. As always, please stay safe out there.